Now we'll go to the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation.
Good morning. Do I need to press a button here? No. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Honorable members of the committee, thank you for granting me the opportunity to address you today. And first, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional lands of the Wendat, Anishinaabe, and Hautenoshone's people. May we always be grateful to live and learn on these lands. I would like to draw your attention to our written submission. I believe that has been handed to each and every one of the committee members here. And with me today is John Wells, OSSTF FEESO staff, who is responsible for educational finance at OSSTF. I stand before you as the Vice President of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, a parent and an education worker with a background as a developmental service worker. Our federation represents over 60,000 dedicated educators, including educational assistants, psychologists, social workers, university support staff, public high school teachers, and occasional teachers. Today I'm here to cast a spotlight on the current state of Ontario's educational institutions. Our members, the true experts in nurturing and guiding our students, dedicate themselves daily to imparting knowledge and fostering intellectual and personal development in classrooms across the province. Regrettably, headlines across the province echo a distressing reality. Serious staff shortages are plaguing our boards and post-secondary institutions. December 5th, CBC reported that the Windsor-Essex Public Board declared the impossibility of teaching the most vulnerable children with current staffing levels. On January 7th, GTA principals raised a crisis alarm over school staffing, followed by an ominous headline on January 8th. Toronto schools facing enormous support staff shortages. January 10th brought news of a substitute teacher and educational assistant shortage, directly impacting students' learning and safety. These headlines expose the underfunded and understaffed conditions of Ontario school boards, impeding their ability to meet the needs of our students adequately. In Windsor-Essex, the chair of the board communicated the impossibility of properly teaching the region's most vulnerable children due to government cuts to their budget, a sentiment echoed by school boards province-wide. Our written submission scrutinizes these cuts, revealing a $1,200 reduction in funding per student since 2018 and a $600 cut in per pupil spending in the last year alone. Shockingly, under this government's leadership, Ontario ranks dead last in Canada for per student funding at the post-secondary level. The consequences of these cuts are real and they are profound. Thousands of dollars are missing from every classroom and campus, leaving students without essential supports and services on a daily basis. In the Thames Valley District School Board, encompassing the riding of Oxford, 91 class sections have been cut this semester, impacting students' learning experiences and forcing them into undesired courses, sometimes resorting to online classes. These cuts predominantly target courses designed for students with special needs or those pursuing workplace credits. From Windsor to Oxford, Brockville, Thunder Bay, and Kenora, government cuts disproportionately affect vulnerable students and their families. As a pattern and an alarming move, the Upper Canada District School Board a few years ago slashed 50% of their professional student services personnel, depriving special needs students of crucial daily supports. And I recently heard from a school psychologist, again in Thames Valley, who has over 2 decades of experience, that said more than ever before, students are experiencing significant learning, development, and behavioral concerns, as well as more diverse learning needs. With less resources, every classroom teacher is trying to meet the needs of many more students with greater learning needs. Violence is becoming more frequent, and injuries to staff are unfortunately becoming all too commonplace. There aren't enough educational assistants, social workers, or psychologists to provide early intervention, safety, and support. This is especially concerning as community resources have become increasingly rare and limited as well. Students turn to their schools as one of the only access points they have for mental health support, and yet they're met with further cuts, further underfunding. These cuts are not due to a lack of need, but a failure of this government to provide necessary funding, despite the existence of billions in excess funds and surpluses, as reported by the government's own Financial Accountability Office. This is not the Ontario schools I remember growing up as a kid, and it's not the one we should be living in today. Ontario students deserve the best, and it is our collective duty as lawmakers, as educators, to collaborate and deliver a world-class publicly funded education to every student in our care. As a wealthy province, Ontario possesses the means to turn our 38 recommendations into reality. The real challenge lies not in the availability of funds, but in our collective will and choices. We implore the provincial government to join forces with us, ensuring every school board and classroom is fully funded and staffed, providing all students with the necessary supports, services, and courses they need to succeed. This achievable vision should not remain a fantasy, but become a reality for students of Ontario. OSSTF FEESO calls on the government to collaborate with us in making this vision a reality. Together, let us champion the cause of education and ensure that every student in Ontario receives the world-class public education they rightfully deserve.
I have a question now for Martha from the OSSTF. Thank you very much for coming here today. I wanted to ask you what you feel about de-streaming, especially grade 10, because teachers disagree about de-streaming as far as the ones that I've talked to. And recommendation 17 in your booklet here is about enhanced funding for de-streaming. And I'm just wondering if the OSSTF has a position on de-streaming grade 10, but I can see the recommendations for increased funding here to help with de-streaming and addressing inequality. But what does the OSSTF think about de-streaming grade 10 and maybe other tweaks of de-streaming?
Thank you so much. And just to be clear, OSSTF is not opposed to de-streaming. We do agree with you that it does address inequities within the education system. Where we will press the government is that they need to fund the de-streaming initiative for it to certainly work better. We know that when funding is provided for things like reduced class sizes or dedicated education workers in classrooms, de-streaming can work, but that's not something that we have seen over the course of the last couple of years, and certainly through the course of the implementation of the de-streaming initiative here in Ontario. So as you had pointed out in number 18 and in our recommendations, which is very solution focused, we believe that, if the government were to take the de-streaming initiative seriously and, certainly provide for the training for all education workers and teachers, provide those dedicated education workers in classrooms to support the students and the classroom teacher, that de-streaming can work in Ontario. But unfortunately, that's not where we're at today. So hopefully, through the course of this budget consultation and in the upcoming budget, the government can provide the resources and supports to the school boards to help make this a success.
What's one example? So I'm actually a parent. Next fall, I'll be a parent of somebody, a kid going into grade 9. What's one thing as a parent that's going to affect my kid because the government hasn't properly funded a de-stream grade 9?
Well, there are certainly right now, there isn't the funding necessary to provide the reduced class sizes to support de-streaming. As we know with the previous academic stream, those classroom sizes tended to be higher than the other streams. But with the consolidation of those classes, the government hasn't provided the funding to reduce the class sizes to support the individual needs of the students in those classrooms.
Thank you very much. That concludes the time. MPP Hradowy?
Thank you, Chair. How much time is left?
2.4.
2.4. Okay, thank you. My first question is to Ms. Hradowy. Thank you for being here, traveling from our shared hometown. I'd like to ask you about another letter I received from the Greater Essex County District School Board, and they raised issue with the cap on executive compensation, and that they were unable to attract suitable candidates to their ranks and management because of the government's freeze on executive compensation. I'm wondering if you have any potential comments on that, if this is harming the student experience.
Thank you, MPP Hradowy, and thank you for the question. And for those of you who don't know, he is also my MPP, and we live in the same riding. Our proposal here that we have submitted to you provides 38 solution-focused recommendations for education here in Ontario, specifically in Windsor-Essex. The Greater Essex County District School Board and the members that I speak to are unable to provide the supports to students in their classroom. And as I had said earlier, the reality is that there are families that have to keep their children home because there isn't the staff, educational support staff in the schools to be able to provide the supports and services to their children. That is the real issue facing Windsorites and people in Windsor-Tecumseh, is that the school board isn't able to attract educational assistants because of the low compensation that they receive. It has been further exacerbated by the fact that we are still trying to deal with the impacts of Bill 124. These are not people that are making even $40,000 a year. And as Ms. Walton had spoke about earlier, these are workers that are having to work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. These are people that are having to access the food banks through extended hours in Windsor and Essex County. And so I think the real issue for the school board is, and the government in the upcoming budget, is how are you going to address the fact that school boards are not able to attract staff that provides the direct support to our most vulnerable students in the system.
Chair, I believe any time left? Or?
9 seconds.
9 seconds, okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will now go to the official opposition. MPP Posner.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you so much to the witnesses for joining us this morning. It was quite striking and, may I say, a bit discouraging to have the presentations of Kingston Health Sciences and the OSSTF back-to-back, hearing you both speak of crises in your sector. Ms. McCullough, you used the word unprecedented. Martha, you spoke about something that you never saw when you were in school and when you began your career in education, some similarities in the challenges that we're hearing. Significant underfunding of the sector, shortage of workers, not being able to deliver the service that is expected within the sector. Martha, I'm going to start with you. You alluded to this a bit in your presentation already and then in your response to MPP Hradowy's question, but you laid out a pretty stark picture of the government's underfunding of education, $1,200 less per student in Ontario compared to 6 years ago. So who is paying for that underfunding in Ontario?
I would say our children are, our students are. The very students that we are tasked with providing supports and services to. Our members show up every day wanting to do their best, wanting to provide the best possible care and support to the children in their care. And I have had the opportunity in my role as an executive officer and vice president in OSSTF to tour the province over the last couple of years, and the stories are the same. They really are. The supports are not getting to the front line, and our members are having to do more with less. Our teachers are having to teach with very diverse learning needs of students and very little support in terms of support through educational assistants or social workers, child and youth workers. And so I would say, you know, the real cost and who is paying at the end of the day are the families and children that we're tasked with trying to support. So there was a Conference Board of Canada report that was issued back in 2019, and it really lays out the economic case for investing in education. And through that report, what the Conference Board of Canada had found was that for each dollar that we invest in publicly funded education, $1.30 is generated in positive economic impacts for the province. So we know that investment in education also creates a wide range of private, social, and fiscal benefits, including, I would say, higher tax revenues, and additionally cost savings in healthcare, social assistance, and criminal justice. So investment in publicly funded education does have strong economic returns for the province of Ontario. And if the government could take a look at it through that lens, I think we would be in a lot better position today than we have been over the course of the last couple of years.
Thank you. And you mentioned the Windsor-Essex School Board being unable to offer classes to children with special education needs because of the lack of educational assistance. Thames Valley District School Board cutting class options that particularly targeted with students with special needs. I know the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board, when they had to contemplate cuts this year, we're looking at multiple options, largely affecting students with special needs. Would you say it's fair to say that it's kids with disabilities, kids with learning challenges, kids who need a little extra support in the classroom who are paying the biggest price for this government's cuts to education funding?
I would absolutely agree with you.
Okay. I mean, it's really disheartening that the government is downloading onto children with disabilities, but, you know, government is all about making choices. What happens if we continue down this road without making the investments in education that you're calling for today?
Well, our members are going to continue to do more with less. That is the reality, or the more with less. My apologies. I'm getting tied up in my words here. You know, I said in my presentation that this is not the same education system that I recognized when I had attended, you know, in the 90s. Things have significantly changed. There have certainly been, I have seen a lack of community supports available to families, and particularly we can point to, you know, the 60K is not okay in the Ontario Autism Coalition, the lack of community supports that are not available to families. And the reality is that those children are being put into the school system without the additional community support. So in our presentation, we talk, in our written submission, we talk about tiered supports, and that Tier 3 support does talk about community supports, but we need the additional funding certainly to be able to provide supports to students in our classrooms, in our schools, so, you know, they can continue to thrive just like, you know, every other student here in Ontario.
So the government is actually sitting on $5.4 billion in a slush fund that they're refusing to spend. You know, it's called a contingency fund. Every province has one, but no province puts $5.4 billion in it. But what I'm hearing you say is if the government chose to invest those funds in our students, chose to invest those funds in our kids and education workers, chose to invest those funds in our community services, it would make a huge difference in the province of Ontario.
Absolutely. Long-term sustainable funding. What we have seen, or what I have witnessed over the course of the last couple of years, are announcements and re-announcements about one-time grants for learning recovery and other limited supports for, you know, reading, math, de-streaming initiatives, and that has proven to certainly be inadequate. What we're asking the government to do is to provide long-term sustainable funding in this upcoming budget.
Thank you very much.